Hello again. So, my second video for today, February 20th, 2023. So, I want to get into a subject that's really been itching my brain for several days now. So, I recently finished a book by a man named Thomas Sheridan. It's called Puzzling People: The Labyrinth of the Psychopath. Very good book. Very informative, and it takes things that I've observed, within the human condition, within the world, and he packages these ideas in a very unique way. He has a lot of unique ideas about this, and this is a subject that is very poorly understood. We usually think of psychopaths as serial killers because psychopathy is really only acknowledged within the scope of criminality. But the vast majority of criminals are not psychopaths. They have other reasons. There are other reasons why they've done the things they've done. Now, when you sort of cross-reference that insight with studies done by psychologists that show that psychopaths gravitate towards positions of power, so we're talking politics, journalism, religious clergy, banking, medicine, law. When you take that into account, people in positions of power and influence who are funding universities and, medical associations, they probably don't want the public to know very much about psychopaths, and they don't want psychiatric professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, to know all that much about psychopaths and to be able to identify them, because it would expose their games that they're playing every single day. So, very interesting, very important subject. And my whole point in making this video is that really, when many people in this world are constantly accusing other people, especially people in positions of power and influence, or they're just accusing people who don't follow their religion as being Satanists. But really, in the scope of this video, it's about people in power and influence who are constantly being accused by truthers and religious fundamentalists of being Satanists. And what they do is they paint a very comic book-like picture of Satanists. And they have been led to believe by, the so-called luminaries of the truth movement, and basically people who want to make their living online, on YouTube. They've been taught by these people to just see Satanists everywhere. So what many religious fundamentalists, especially Christian fundamentalists, and people in the truth movement would have you believe is that everybody who has some sort of power in this world is conducting, black masses and satanic ceremonies and drinking adrenochrome and baby blood and eating babies and all this shit. That's what a lot of people would have you believe. That's what a lot of people believe themselves. But it's just kind of asinine to believe that to be the truth about millions and millions and millions of people who have more power and influence and money than you. Certainly there are people in this world who are involved in some, dark, weird, strange, ceremonial activity. It's always been around. It's like, it's in the Old Testament. the reason given in the Old Testament for why the elite of the Israelites were taken captive by the Babylonians was because they were being punished by God for sacrificing children. So, it's something that has gone on in the world, and that was captured in that mythological story of the Babylonian captivity. So it's something that has gone on in the world, but to think that every C-level corporate executive is doing it, and all the judges around the country and the heads of the military and every member of Congress and the vast majority of Wall Street are all doing this. It's ridiculous, and it's a ridiculous fantasy, and what it does is it helps people in the truth movement, helps religious fundamentalists feel like heroes. And that's the thing that America has going on. It's like everybody's a hero. Everybody who can read the right books and turn on a television is a fucking hero. But it's like we're also outraged cowards because we don't do anything. We just listen to shit on the internet, read TV, read scriptures, read books, and we bitch. We bitch about the Satanists. There's a lot, or people bitch about whoever they think is horrible and evil and all this shit. So, but yeah, it's the idea that all these millions of people who have more power, money, and influence than you are all doing satanic human sacrifice rituals and eating people. It's pretty fucking ridiculous. I'm convinced there are people in this world that are doing it, but really the people running the world, they're pragmatic. They're very pragmatic. They don't have a lot of time to fuck around with ceremonies and rituals. And a thing about psychopaths, narcissists, you can also call them. They just want their gratification as quickly and as efficiently as they can get it. So the vast majority of these people, if you told them, oh, we got to do this so we can succeed. We got to eat babies. They'd be like, that's a pain in the ass and a liability. And there are much more efficient ways to do this. Like, we can just control what goes out over the television, and that'll help us to accomplish 99% of our goals. So this is a little commentary on the subject. Let's get into it a little more. Let's define some of these things, okay? So this term Satan or satanic, what is it? Now, until about 100 years ago, satanic had a whole different meaning. So Satan, it comes from, it's an Iranian kind of Proto-Arabic word, shaitan. So shaitan meant an opposer or an accuser, somebody who goes against the status quo, somebody who goes against orthodoxy, who doesn't want to do things the way other people do it. So an example of this is, especially in the old times when druids, religious leaders, whoever, they would get together and have a debate. And people being what they are, they want to gain the approval of figures of authority. They want to please figures of authority. So most of these people in these councils, they'll wait for the head honcho to state his opinion. And then they'll agree with him, and they'll make their cases for why they agree with him. And yeah, maybe they'll have some minor disagreements, but it's like the TV news today. It's within such small intellectual bounds that the differences don't matter. But the druid or religious leader or whoever the hell in the council who took the opposing viewpoint was called a shaitan, was called the Satan, because they went against orthodoxy. They went against the head honcho's opinion and said, no, I have a completely different opinion. I don't agree with that. That's bullshit. So that's what that meant. And even when you get into the Christian era, you know, satanic meant not following Orthodox Christianity or Islam. It just meant people who were, they were unconventional, they were eccentric, they were doing things that are not in the religious rule books. It didn't mean that they were, you know, conjuring up this being Satan, because really the being Satan, you know, this like singular being with like a human looking appearance, that's not what this term means. And actually, you know, Pope John Paul, who was he was the Pope who died in what, 2005. Before his death, he admitted that the church had invented hell in the form most people understand it to be in, and they invented the devil, which the devil gets conflated with both Lucifer and Satan. So they basically invented that there's this like this being, there's this one being that's orchestrating everything in the universe that we think is bad or evil. So satanic meant going against the grain. So it could mean that somebody doesn't respect human life, or it could just mean that they don't want to submit to religious authorities. That can mean many different things. It's like the term evil. It's like in a previous video I said evil, it's French, or excuse me, devil. Devil is French. It means of evil, that which is of evil. But evil, again, in the early Christian era, it just meant those people that don't do things our way. And this is what human beings do, whether they're religious or atheists or whatever. Anything that doesn't conform with their way of doing things and their group's way of doing things is bad and evil and horrible. But then the people on the other side will have the same view. It's like people who, you know, Christianity became, for example, Christianity became the dominant religion in Europe because church leaders came in, they bribed rulers, and they said, hey, make your people join our religion. You'll have even more power. We'll give you money and we'll justify all of the dirty things you have to do to make our religion the dominant one. And so basically the rulers tried to convince their people to convert, and those they couldn't convince were killed with the blessing of the Christian church. So, you know, and a lot of Protestants try to say, well, that was the Catholic Church. Well, in those days, there was only the Christian church. There wasn't all these denominations. So Protestantism comes from Catholicism. It's an outgrowth of it. So that argument doesn't work. But yeah, that's how Christianity and Islam came to dominate. If they couldn't fool people, if rulers couldn't be bribed to coerce or fool or persuade their people into it, the people who wouldn't convert were just killed. And many people witnessing this were frightened. So yeah, the people who didn't want to go along with that, they were evil or satanic. But if you were one of those people who were being persecuted because these followers of this loving God were ready to kill you because you wouldn't join their club, you would have thought those people, those Christians, were evil and satanic and demonic. You know, you have to see things from other people's point of view too. So yeah, this word satanic just until about 100 years ago meant going against the grain, not following orthodoxy. So that's the deal with that. You know, and the thing I looked up here, I looked up the 7 central tenets of the Church of Satan. So the Church of Satan was founded by Anton LaVey back in San Francisco. It was in the late 60s, maybe like 1966, 67, something like that. This church attracted a lot of artists, entertainers, musicians. Sammy Davis Jr. is one that comes to mind. Jane Mansfield, kind of look like Marilyn Monroe. A whole bunch of others, they escape me right now, but a lot of Hollywood types went and joined this. So, and this convinces a lot of people, oh, well, you see, all of Hollywood drinks adrenochrome and baby blood. And it's like, well, let's look at what this Church of Satan is. Let's look at what they're saying about their values. All right, so number one should strive to act with compassion and empathy toward all creatures in accordance with reason. That makes sense. Acting with compassion and empathy in accordance with reason, this means that you don't act with compassion and empathy towards manipulators, people who want to exploit you, people who want to abuse you. Whereas, so this is not a turn the other cheek kind of a thing. That's very sensible, I think. 2, struggle for justice as an ongoing and necessary pursuit that would prevail over laws and institutions. That should prevail over laws and institutions. The struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions. No problem with that. That makes sense, right? Number 3, one's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone. I can see where they're coming from, especially in the 60s when this is when, abortion rights became a big thing. Abortion's always been around, but until that point, the religious institutions had a strong grip on the government. So it was basically churchmen telling women what to do because they were like, well, it says in this book here. Well, what gives anybody the right to, decide what's best for someone else? 4, the freedoms of others should be respected, including freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forego one's own. They're talking about freedom. Now, what's interesting as an American, to me, it doesn't make sense that, so we're supposed to have this culture of freedom, but then a lot of people will tell you, well, America is a Christian culture, and if you're not a Christian, you're not an American. And it's like, well, and the thing is, with these biblical religions, they're very conformist. They have these 10 rules you must follow. If you don't do things and see things Jehovah's way, you're evil, you're satanic, you're a bad person. Well, that's not freedom, that's conformity. So how can a country of freedom, it's like, how can it have a religion of conformity? That is cognitive dissonance. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. So, yeah, these guys are actually talking about freedom. And a lot of people will say, well, freedom is implied in the Bible. And it's like, well, like where? Show me. In Romans, I think it's in Romans, it says, be compliant, obey your leaders, whether they're wicked or kind. And it's like, well, that's not freedom. Yeah. So number 5, belief should conform to one's own best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's own beliefs. Well, in 2023, we've been seeing this for a long time. Everybody is distorting science to fit their own beliefs. It's big with the woke right now. It's big on the left, but it's been big in the church community for a long time. Like this whole thing where, dinosaur bones are Satan fabricated them in order to convince us that the world is more than 5,500 years old. That's not in the mainstream of religion. That's in the real extreme, but still, it's part of that community. 6, people are fallible. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it and resolve any harm that might have been caused. So this means people make mistakes. You don't have to feel guilty about it. You don't have to whip yourself for the rest of your life. You don't have to freak out that you're going to burn in hell or something because you did something wrong. Instead of bitching about it internally and beating yourself up and, being like, oh, Lord, forgive me. It's like, just make good on it and get past it and quit the guilt shit. All right. And then 7, every tenet, so tenets of this Church of Satan, every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. That's pretty good. So then, but what do we have with government? What do we have with religion? It's all about the word. It's like, it's not only government and the legal system that's legalistic, but religious communities can be extremely legalistic. And it's like, well, it's all in this book. It's all in this book of rules. And if it doesn't conform to the word, it's evil. It's untrue, right? So those are the tenets of the Church of Satan. Now, the argument people make is like, well, that looks all well and good, but really they're drinking adrenochrome and baby blood and murdering and driving down the street, murdering people indiscriminately. Well, I'm sure somebody's doing things like that. The world being what it is. But find me where it's written that, their tenets is to murder people and eat people and drink their blood and chew on their adrenal glands. It's like, find it in writing for me. So that doesn't exist. But it's like, yeah, people do this stuff. But again, to think that all of Hollywood's doing it, some huge portion of the judges in this country and in the world, most of Wall Street, all of Congress, a huge percentage of the federal bureaucracy, that they're all doing it. Pretty preposterous. And then people, they have the missing people angle. It's like, well, probably what's happening with missing people is they're being used in labs, gain of function labs, probably. And I don't think there's really anything ceremonial going on. Now, when you get to the whole secret society piece, historically, a lot of people have been people in positions of power, influence, have been part of secret societies. Freemasonry was very prevalent among powerful and influential people, but Freemasonry's been falling apart really for the last, 75, since after World War II, it's been dwindling. And I think among power circles, they're not really taking that stuff seriously anymore. They're very pragmatic. And really, I think at this point, it's like Freemasonry is a networking group, and it does attract people who are kind of parasitic and kind of energy vampires, but they're low-level local people. So yeah, that's an institution that's in serious decline. Now, are there other secret societies? Yeah, definitely. But I think at this point, technology has gotten to the point where it's really easy to blackmail people and catch people in indiscretions. You don't have to induct them into a lodge and get them to, do drugs and get drunk and have sex with somebody in your lodge where you have, cameras set up. So I think really technology is making a lot of that pretty unnecessary. So, yeah. So anyway, little explanation, what Satanism is, and that's the deal with the Church of Satan. Let's talk about psychopaths here, because this is very important. So I think my whole point in bringing up and getting some detail out about psychopaths, when people are trying to tell you that, some powerful, influential person is satanic or a Satanist, what they really want to say is that this person is a psychopath. But the public is not very aware of what being a psychopath looks like. They think it's just being a Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, David Berkowitz kind of a serial killer. But the vast majority of psychopaths are not criminals. And really, it's like 1 in 22 people is a psychopath. So a psychopath is somebody who they actually have, it's clinically shown, they have very different nervous systems. They are basically like a subspecies of humanity. So that it's almost like they're Homo psychopath, not quite Homo sapien. They have very unusual electrical activity in their brains and their nervous system. And the nervous system doesn't function in an optimal human way. Their brains store information in a very scattered sort of a way. They don't, the brain stores information in sort of very typical mappable places. So it's like a defragmented hard drive, whereas psychopaths, the hard drive is very fragmented. So take information in any given subject. Instead of that information being in like one compartment in the brain, it's like it's scattered all over it. So their minds are very chaotic, and it takes them a lot of energy to basically to function, like normal human beings do. So what's often found with psychopaths is that they have trouble functioning. So, the work that most people can accomplish, say in an 8-hour day, it'll take a psychopath double that to do it. And it's like in workplaces, they can use this. So they'll make it look like they're the overachieving employee who's going above and beyond, but really they're struggling to get the 8 hours of work done within the 16 hours. And usually they don't even do that. And because that their electrical systems are so dysfunctional, they can't hold energy. So they're basically always deficient on energy. They're always running low. So what they have to do, and they're not even really thinking about it. They feel compelled on a deep, unconscious, subconscious level to be energy vampires, to basically feed off of other people's energy. So it's like they don't really know how to do things for themselves, but they know how to exploit other people's labor. They know how to get people to do things for them in order to make them look good. But what they end up doing is they always end up burning their bridges. People get sick of them eventually. Except for when you have institutions who are populated by psychopaths. So it's like at this point, within corporate leadership, you have these CEOs who jump to a new company every year and a half, 2 years, and they're just there to create hype about the stock and get people to invest in it. But they make a mess of the company. The shareholders fire them, And then they go to a new company, they create some hype, they fuck the company up, they get fired, they go to a new company. So they're basically hype people. That's all they know how to do. They know how to hype and they know how to exploit other people's labors. So there is something parasitic with psychopaths. And they don't know differently. Um, and they're kind of empty shells. But let me get into the five psychiatric traits. So in Thomas Sheridan's book, this Labyrinth of the Puzzling People, Labyrinth of the Psychopath, he lays out the five absolute psychopathic traits. So the first one, the pity play and the sob stories. Politicians do this every day. Don't really need to explain that one. I think clergy often do this. It's like how they taught people how to get into the just blame Satan mentality. And it's like, oh, we'd have a beautiful world and things would be utopian if it wasn't for Satan. He's so mean. It's like, no. It's like, one, you can't have a perfect world. Two, things are the way they are is because of one, human nature, and two, human nature is that people want to suck up the figures of authority. So if people didn't suck up the figures of authority, they would be able to expel figures of authority who are abusive and exploitative. So yeah, pity play and sob stories, that's a big one. Um, and along with that, it's like they're always trying to go save somebody. They'll tell you somebody else's sob story. It's like this whole white guilt thing that's become prevalent. And they're like, did you know you're a horrible person as a white person because you've exploited everybody else in the world? That's a variation on that. Now, another one, the invented persona. So, invented people who invent personas and they're not genuine, they don't do anything genuine. We call these people fake. Politicians, corporate leaders are big into this. Lawyers will do this, to make money. Especially like personal injury lawyers, it's like they'll take up someone's case and they're like, I'm gonna fight for you and blah 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 blah. And it's like, well, they don't give a shit. They just want a payoff. So yeah, invented personas. And it's like how you'll see a politician giving speeches to different audiences and they're a different person. It's like, Barack Obama was pretty classic. I can't stand either party. He jumps out in my mind. So, when he's on the news, he's got that total stick up the butt, Ivy League educated voice. He's like, my fellow Americans, I think that you are all a bunch of dupes. So he had that thing going on, but then he would speak to, some, civil rights or advocacy group for black people to a black audience. He'd basically be speaking Ebonics and he'd be going, oh, I'm pretty ratchet, and it's like, it's like so much for being yourself. And you can find this with anybody, with Donald Trump, with any of them. If you see them speaking to smaller groups, they're a different person. And it's like you do have to speak to an audience, but to really have integrity, you have to be yourself. And I think with the invented personas, one thing you see, I lost my place here. Pulled a piece of paper out, I didn't mean to. I was looking for the secondary traits. Anyway, with the invented personas, you've probably seen the politicians smile, where instead of, people smile and their eyes smile, they have like the dead eyes and they go. It's hard to do. It's like Dick Cheney, where he's like, he's trying to smile and his eyes are just cold and dead, and he's like, Hillary Clinton does it a lot too. It's like, look for that. It's like scowling eyes or just dead eyes, and then the mouth is all. It's creepy to look at. Yeah. It's hard to do, but yeah, the eyes scowl or they're just dead and the mouth smiles. So, and the thing too with the invented personas, psychopaths don't have the typical range of human emotions. They really don't have their other emotions. So what they do is they want to elicit emotional responses out of other people so they can they feed off the energy of other people's emotions. All right. So yeah, they're basically they're like the predatory subspecies within humanity. Um, Psychopaths missing past history. So, you see this with powerful people. But then, and not just powerful people, but this happens where people have gaps in their past, in the story of their past, or they misrepresent things. It's like Bill Clinton. People are always like, oh, he's so smart. He's a Rhodes Scholar. He never completed the Rhodes Scholar program or graduated from it because he spent all of his time at Oxford University smoking weed and protesting with British hippies. So he never completed it. He was selected, he was awarded a Rhodes Scholarship, but he never actually completed it. But that's glossed over. So it's about glossing over the past, because what happens, psychopaths make a huge fucking mess everywhere they go. Things don't end well and they have to gloss it over. So now here's a big one, a lack of remorse. So there's another thing people will accuse Satanists of. It's like, well, they have no remorse and they'll do anything it takes to get what they want. And it's like, well, yeah. And everybody running the world does that. And the prevailing world religions, that's how they got on top. They had no remorse and they did whatever it took to become dominant. And then what's the fifth here? So the fifth one is like high levels of testosterone. How this translates is these people have an addictive quality. So people want to be around these high testosterone psychopaths. In, on a mass scale with powerful people, they know how to make hype. They know how to get out onto a stage and wind people up, and the people are just fawning over them. They're like, oh my God, oh, this person's so dreamy and so amazing. So on a mass scale, that's what they do. On a personal level, it's like, person to person, how this translates is like, it's a relationship that it gets going very quickly. It turns sexual very quickly. And the psychopathic person seems to have like an endless sex drive and, can just do all this crazy shit. But then it goes away. And, the relationship cools, very quickly. And, eventually they put that energy into like, they'll be running multiple relationships at the same time. And the affairs that religious, political, corporate leaders are constantly having. They can't feel intimacy, so they have to, once the novelty and newness is worn off, they have to go on to they have to have a new relationship and a new relationship and a new relationship. It's like a Bill Clinton or whoever. Any of them. So yeah, these are the primary characteristics here. So again, this is what's really going on with people running the world. They're psychopaths. The idea that they're all putting on black robes and doing these satanic rituals and all this shit. It's like, no, that's very it's very dramatic. It's very comic bookish. But the thing is, we're in what, the third, fourth generation of, TV generations here in America. People love sensationalism. And really, this has come from a religious culture too. They love sensationalism. And people love to freak out. They love to freak out about how horrible the enemy is so that they can cast themselves as heroes. So it's a lot more exciting and sensational for you to say that, people running the world are adrenochrome and baby blood drinking Satanists who do rituals rather than, you know what, they're psychopaths who just feed on other people and they're very practical and pragmatic. And they just compulsively exploit other people. It's not as sensational. So people don't like it as much. But when people are running around accusing everybody in power and influence of being satanic, what they're really trying to say, in my opinion, is that these people are psychopathic. But when you start looking honestly at psychopaths, you see them everywhere. You see them in your family, in your church, in your work environment, in your community. So this is a fact that we have to face up to. And this is the topic that goes straight up my ass sideways, where it's like, people are on Satan watch. They're like, oh, why is that happening? Oh, it must be Satan. Anything that doesn't jive with them. Satan's up to it. And it's like, stop being a fucking drama queen. Be objective about this. And, realize where this term has come from. Especially your church. Your church's way of teaching you how to say that everybody who's different is satanic. That's how the psychopaths who led that church got ahead. Because they just accuse everybody of being evil that didn't do things their way. So yeah, I hope this sheds some light on this whole thing. I'll probably be talking more about this. Have a nice one.